Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Oh Ship. We have yet another incredible guest on. And this one is a new friend, uh, a member of Chameleon Collective, but also someone just an incredible pedigree and background as a CMO and as a leader. And this week we're going to talk about a really fun subject that I find inspiring, and I hope all of you will find inspiring, which is about making tough leadership decisions in business. So the guest that we have on today, I think, is someone whose opinion you're going to really value in that. He has been the CMO of big businesses. He's been the CMO of small businesses. He's been with global brands. He's been with smaller ones. But I can't. I like to name drop. I admit it. I like to name drop every once in a while. And let me give you just a couple of the roles he's had before. He has been the CMO and SVP of ecom for Brinks Home Security. He has been the CMO of TaxSlayer. He has been the CMO of Wells Fargo Advisors. He has been the CMO of Scottrade. He has been the CMO of Experian. And he's even the co-president of the CMO Club. I would argue there's a good chance if you look his name up in Wikipedia or look up CMO, you might even see his face there. So if you're looking for great C-level advice, our friend Chris Moloney might be the guy to talk to. And with that, we're going to jump into this week's episode so we can talk about making tough leadership decisions in business.
Oh shit.
So, back, Chris, welcome to Oh Ship. I'm glad you're here.
Well, thanks, Freddie. Glad to be here. Love the show. Very excited to now be on it, and glad to be a part of it. So thank you.
Chris, obviously, I know you saw the warm up, and I name dropped quite a few of the big companies you've done. I know you've also spent your fair share of time on the agency side as well. So I think you're kind of a dual threat, and you have a lot of have a lot of different point of views. What I'd love to do is I want you to tell our audience a little bit more about yourself briefly. And then we're going to do a new thing on those shit we've never done before. We're going to have an icebreaker round. We're going to get into some weird stuff right off the bat, and then we're going to jump into this subject. So, Chris, tell our audience a little bit more about your background beyond all the big titles I name dropped.
Yeah, of course. So I've always been in marketing. I'm one of those people who actually got into marketing. Back in high school, my parents got me the first Mac, literally the first Macintosh. And so I started designing and playing around with it and wound up becoming, editor of the high school newspaper and then editor of my college newspaper, and was always into design and marketing. I actually did start out in more journalism, in a marketing capacity, helping design newspapers, but I've always been in marketing. And it's all because of the Mac. The Mac was like what got me into design and graphics. But I migrated over to database marketing and then did almost 10 years in customer loyalty and CRM, and really got to know how important it is to manage your existing customer database. That was a big part of my life, and understanding how your customers are so important to keep them and retain them and get them to tell others about you. And then I made the leap to the client side. My first CMO job was Scottrade, and spent 5 years there and haven't looked back, and really got into digital marketing. Got into.
I heard a rumor the other day from one of the other team members that you had managed over $1 billion in media spend in your career. Is that true?
Yeah, I had somebody ask
Pretty
me,
crazy.
I think challenge me at one point about like media spend, and I had to go back and go through the budgets I'd had. And I mean, these companies were spending, hundreds of millions of dollars in media. And so, this was a little bit earlier in the measurement days, so you had to have a little bit of gut feel about what was working. The old adage, I know 50% of my marketing is working, I just don't know which 50%. I think maybe we're now up to 70 or 80%, but we're not sure which 70 or 80% of our marketing is working, but it's better today than it was then. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to be in charge of big media budgets. But, I've also enjoyed small companies and being really scrappy too.
It reminds me, it's not quite as fun as it was in the mid 2000s when I distinctly remember telling a global brand when they asked, "Why will this work?" And I said, "Because it's awesome." And they were like, that seems reasonable, and they signed off and did the project. So it's little more in the weeds now in terms of data and accountability. So look, we're gonna get into some serious conversations today. I think around what it means to be a leader. I've been a CEO in a leadership role since I was 19 years old. It obviously had a big effect on me. So it can be a little bit stressful being a leader, and so this is one of my favorite subjects. But before we get into that, I want to have what we're calling an icebreaker round. We're going to ask you some questions. Your answers, I want them in 5 seconds or less, maybe 10 seconds if you have to think about them for a second. Short, sweet, punchy answers. Are you ready? We're
I
going to
am.
start from easiest to harder. Okay.
All
What is
right.
the worst commute you've ever had?
The worst commute I had is easy. I lived in Atlanta and worked in Atlanta, and I actually didn't have a
First,
terrible commute to work, but we traveled a lot. So from north Atlanta to the airport is like a 2 hour haul, and I had to do that all the time. That's
since
not
you're
fun.
easier, you better off taking a helicopter from the house. Okay, best commute.
I had it in St. Louis when I was with Scottrade, like a 10-minute commute, but it was almost so short you didn't get to unwind on the drive home.
Is
So
that really better than your 2020 pandemic commute? I mean, what is it? How
uh,
many rooms away from your bed are you right
that's
now? Is
true.
this is this an adjacent bedroom?
Not too far, but there's pros and cons of that. But that was probably the shortest, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Google work or G Suite now Workspace or Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
Which one? Yes,
Oh,
you're
I'm
taking both.
sorry. Repeat the question.
Okay. Are you a Google guy or a Microsoft guy?
I'm in both every day because of the work I do, but I'm leaning toward Google for sure.
Zoom or Meet?
Zoom.
I feel you on that one. Toughest place you've ever had to work?
I worked for a really big bank at one time, and I remember it took a year to get approval to launch a Facebook page, and that's just not good for the marketing vibe when it
It's
takes a
not
year to
good.
launch a Facebook page.
Getting more specific now. Toughest leadership role you've ever had?
I was CEO of a marketing technology
Yeah.
company 5 or 6 years ago, and that was really tough. I think the toughest moment was probably having to cut the marketing budget as CEO. That was a really bad day for me.
You're hurting your special place in your heart. Okay, I know that no leadership role is easy, but of all the roles you've had, what's the easiest leadership role you've had, the least stressful?
At the same time, working for the big bank was very slow, so it just wasn't a high
You
pressure
get the
situation.
year to launch your Facebook
Yeah,
page. You say,
the expectations were low on speed, but
yes.
it was frustrating at the same time.
um, what's the most fun leadership role you've ever had?
The most fun leadership role, I worked for a marketing services company called Merits for 5 or 6 years, and everybody there just worked hard and had a lot of fun and got to know each other. And I still have tons of friends from that company, like maybe 20 people I stay in touch with. So I think it's cool when you work somewhere and you leave and you still keep tons of friends from that company. That was cool.
That's cool. And I'm going to put you on the spot on this one. I know that no one ever would ever want to declare a favorite child because you get in a lot of trouble. But can you declare a favorite boss?
Back in that marketing services company, I had a boss. I'll say his name was Mark, and he really mentored me. He took me under his wing and taught me a ton of stuff. And so he definitely was one who invested in me, and I'll always remember the support he gave me in developing me into being a leader. Really.
Okay, that's it'd be interesting to see how that impacts in some of the conversations we're about to have. And last and final one, who's your most hated boss? No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to tell us that, Chris. I'm not going to put you on the spot.
We don't
Just
have the time for
kidding.
that one.
Too mean, too mean. So let's get into the kind of real meat of today's conversation. Um, as I said earlier, being a leader and being a boss is really hard. It requires you to, I'm one of the people that I believe that the leader, whether you're the CEO or in the C-suite, I believe you're in service to your employees. I believe that the buck stops with leader um, and I think that that means you have to take on a lot of weight, both the weight of the role, but also let's say this the more functional responsibilities, but also the emotional responsibilities of what it means to support your team. So, you know, as we get into this with you, I'd love to just kind of understand what that's been that kind of experience has been like for you. And so, I guess the first question I'd ask is, getting right down the opposite end of the spectrum of our icebreaker round. Have you ever been kind of close to the edge of failing as a leader, or really struggling in some specific challenge as a leader, and how did you recover from that?
As a CMO, I think I've had a couple of roles where you're brought in as a change agent, and they're waiting for this marketing change agent to come in and change everything and stir it up quite a bit. The one that stands out, I think, as the biggest challenge, and the one where I had some days where I said, I don't know how we're going to pull this off. I went to work for one of the biggest credit bureaus, and they at that time had a huge business that was direct to consumer, and that was the biggest part of the business was, credit reports and credit scores for consumers. And literally, Freddie, my first week in, we have a boardroom meeting, a big meeting, and their biggest product, which generates hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, they made a decision that they wanted to switch all the customers to a different product line. This was in an era where we were moving from credit reports being the focus to credit scores being the focus. And so we were shifting the entire product line. And I also owned the product team, and we had to literally build a new marketing and a new product in a matter of weeks. And I just didn't think it was possible to shift it. So that was a super stressful one. But the fun part about it was our strategy at the time. So this was freecreditreport.com. And you may recall 10, 12 years ago, they ran TV ads like crazy all night long, all the night shows. They had a band that was singing about their credit score and their credit report.
I remember that.
And they were goofy, funny ads that people watched, and the songs were catchy. So I said, well, what we'll do to transfer from this brand to this brand is we'll keep the band. We'll just keep the band and let them, kind of do a circuit of promoting the new brand. So get this, I dig in and I find out that the band are actually French Canadian. They don't sing and they don't speak English. All of the commercials were created. All of these commercials were created by an ad agency, and it's
you had your very own Milli Vanilli moment. It sounds like
it was a Milli Vanilli moment in marketing, the Milli Vanilli of marketing. And so I said, well, this isn't going to work. And so it was over the course of like 24 hours, we brainstormed, what are we going to do? Like they want to launch this new brand in a month, and we can't use the old band. So this was a time, 10, 11 years ago, Freddie, when American Idol and all those shows were actually really big and still sort of new, the voting for your favorite singer. Yeah. So we brainstormed that we would do a band search. So we did a nationwide band search, went Chicago, LA, New York, all over the country, promoted it, and got local bands to audition to be the free credit score band. And it was a huge success. We drew hundreds of different, there's a video of some of the bands that made it to the finals, hundreds of bands. All of the band's fans were voting for us. Their friends, they were promoting, themselves locally. We went through rounds of finalists. And the interesting thing about it was it also became an incredible lead generator, because to vote for the band, you had to basically fill out a little lead form.
Ah, smart.
So
I mean, I don't know if you could say how many leads do you think something like that would actually generate?
Millions of leads.
Wow.
It was unbelievable because we ran this thing nationwide. We partnered up with MTV to do the search. So it had a little bit of street cred. It wasn't just a marketing campaign. It actually had some street cred. We did some performances in big venues. And the band was going to get to go on tour with the MTV summer tour. And so it was going to be a pretty fun deal for the band. So I got to meet a lot of musicians, a lot of fun musicians, a lot of struggling musicians, in venues all across the country. And I'm a music fan, so this was a blast.
Cool. Nice perk.
Total blast. And we wound up in the end picking a band that was out of Detroit, and their original name was Victorious Secrets. And about a week in, where we have all the media created, and we get a letter from our friends at the clothing company, that it's a violation of their copyright. So we have to go back to the drawing board and rename the band. So this was like the wildest time of my life. It was just nonstop, 24/7, decision making, big decisions. And there were a few times there I thought we'd completely fall over,
Yeah,
but it didn't.
something
It
like
worked
this.
out.
I have to ask. I mean, like, even this is the fun thing about marketing. Like, I have certain skills that I know or tactics I've been very successful with in the past. I don't know if I would have guessed that this would generate millions of credit score generation or registrations for you guys. Did you suspect that would happen? Or, I mean, I'm sure you knew it would be good, but did you think it would go up into millions? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it saying, "Hey, it was
Now,
good," but it was way better than I even dreamt. You know what I mean?
we thought it might be 100,000 or something very
Oh
nominal. We
my
had no
God.
idea it would generate the buzz that it did, and it was a lot of fun. Now, there's one other controversy here that was thrown at me. There were a lot of followers of the old band who
Yeah,
wanted us to bring the old band back,
yeah.
and we knew we pretty much couldn't. So,
Were
but
they
we did
yelling
do
at
a
you in
voting.
French?
Well, yeah, yeah, we would have done great in Canada, but it just wasn't going to be. But nonetheless, yeah, we actually had one round where we allowed people to vote on whether they liked the old band or one of the new bands, and we kind of crossed our fingers, and fortunately, the new band won. But
Yeah,
I don't know what we would have done if the old band won. Like we
yeah, yeah.
actually let people vote on it, but it was a great campaign. We got recognized with an award called a Grand Midas, which is the top award in financial services marketing.
Yeah,
I have it on one of the shelves behind me, and
that's great.
it
One to
was
be
the
proud
most
of.
fun. But I got to tell you, it was a lot of fun. But I felt like where that period of time where you feel like you worked 5 years and it was only a
Yeah,
year, like
yeah.
crazy.
That's awesome, though. What a great story. And obviously, I remember the ads from back in the day, and so I had no idea there was that big backstory behind them. So I will now look at those in a new light when I see them. So that's great. I love that. So I guess that's another great territory for going. How about when you think about the work that you're doing now, and so now you're even doing interim leadership roles. But obviously you still have been doing very recently large client size roles. I think the most recent one was Brinks. Um, when you think about the way your decision making process, or how you approach decision making as a leader now versus maybe even how you were doing it 10 or 15 years ago, what would you say has changed the most?
So if I had to think about it, I'd say you had less data 10 years ago. With the advent of all of the digital data and all the third party data and all the thing we have now, we had less data, especially on the acquisition side. And
Mhm.
so that adage about you knew that 50% of your marketing was working, you just didn't know which 50% really felt true to me when I was running a lot of TV and a lot of radio and a lot of print media. You were just kind of hoping it all came together, that it was building energy in the funnel. And I did both B2B and B2C. This isn't exclusive to B2C.
Yeah.
The challenge I would say now is we have so much more data,
Mhm.
and so you feel like maybe you get a flood of data, and now you've got to make a decision and get people aligned around what the data means. So the biggest difference I'd say is that we have a lot more data now, and you've got to leverage that data to get alignment. But two
Mhm.
people can look at the same report and see a very different result. So you still have to trust your gut, Freddie. I think there's still a lot of gut. It hasn't all moved to science.
Mhm.
And Malcolm Gladwell, I think it's in the book Blink, writes about, if you've had 10,000 hours of experience doing something, your gut has this incredible intuitive,
Mhm.
ability to make decisions because you've experienced things you can't even explain. And so I do think there's still an opportunity to trust the gut, even though we have more data than ever.
And so when, beyond marketing decisions, when you start thinking of team leadership, solving political challenges even inside an organization, or how to navigate and get things done and just make things happen within in a company. What about those kind of decisions? Is that I'm guessing the gut still plays into it, but has that evolved for you as you've progressed?
Yeah, I think the one thing I've learned, and I've had some mentors really, walk me through this, is building relationships with other key departments. As a marketer, you typically are having, a lot of budget need. So
Mhm.
you really need to partner closely with the CFO and make sure the CFO understands what you're doing. When you're doing B2B marketing, you need to be really close to sales and understand how do they feel about the leads you're generating, and have that honest conversation. I'd say probably I've just gotten more honest over the years in terms of building relationships and, sharing what happens in the marketing world. Maybe we were a little bit more siloed back in the day, and I think now marketing is such a big part of an organization. In most companies that I'm in, like, marketing is part of a little bit of everything, and so building bridges with people is key, and getting peers aligned with what you're trying to accomplish. That's how you make decisions, because a lot of times you're not making a decision as a sole person. Like, you have to get 3 or 4 other leaders on board if you're making a big decision.
What would you say is the toughest decision you've ever had to make as a leader in the professional environment? Maybe not personal life choices, but toughest decision
Yeah.
you've ever had to make in a suite level role.
Well, I kind of joked earlier when I was CEO and 6 months in had to scale back the marketing budget. That was more emotionally tough than it was actually tough, because it was just where we were as an organization. We needed to scale back spend. But I think it's also hard when you make a decision to change companies, when you're in a good role and you make a decision to change companies. So when I was in Southern California with Experian, and it was, a beautiful place to be, great weather. And had some family reasons, and had an opportunity back in St. Louis, and I moved back for family reasons, and had to kind of put my career a little bit behind, and move for that reason. And that's tough. Balancing your personal life and your work life is always a tough decision. That one I remember being pretty tough.
Mhm. I can really identify with that. I find that I can handle work stress really well, but I call it affairs of the heart. Anytime anything becomes kind of an affair of the heart, I find it way harder to solve as a leader. I think, maybe with business stuff, it's easily to apply rationality to it, and so you can go, look, I've waited. I may not like either outcome, but I understand why I'm choosing one or the other. But I think when it starts getting to emotional things, then those reasons aren't quite so easy to balance out, and they can really nag at me. Do you ever kind of deal with the same thing, or is that kind of summarized?
I do know. I think that's true. When you have a lot of emotion involved in a decision, it makes it especially hard. And I've worked in some cultures, Freddie, where the culture was very emotional. So it was part of the work. The work day was super duper emotional, and that makes it just extra hard. Like, if we're going to agree on making decisions as an organization, let's have a framework that has business and logic and financial sense, and let's be driven by that, and maybe what's right for the customer, what's right for the employees, being that North Star. But don't get so emotional that you wind up getting into a dispute with a coworker or colleague. That's just tough.
No, never a good look. So you,
Mhm.
you mentioned something earlier I want to go back to, and you were talking about how you had this role, and basically a weekend you were asked to make some really, really big decisions. In your opinion, how long should a leader be in a role before their boss asks them to make a big decision like that? Like, is a week fair? Obviously life isn't fair. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But in an ideal world, what do you think is a reasonable time frame that a leader should be kind of asked to assume the mantle? Could be day one at the end of the day
Yeah.
if that's the world, but I'd love to get your take.
Yeah, a lot of roles, especially a CMO or a head of strategy or a head of product role, like, you are asked to make decisions quickly. You're a change agent. And I do think there'll be decisions you make in your first few weeks that are important. But the decision that I was asked to make in week one about changing a hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue brand over,
Pressure.
that may have been too much. That's too
Sure.
much in week one. I think I didn't know the business well enough to make some of those decisions.
Mhm.
Conversely, when I worked for a really big bank, I had a leader say to me, just listen for 4 to 6 months before you really need to speak up. Learn the business first.
Mhm.
And that's not good either. Like, that feels like you're being held back. You want to be able to speak up. But I would say, in that first 90 days, you get to know the business. Toward the end of that 90 days, you should feel comfortable with the ability to make a big decision, but not in your first week. Your first week is just too
Yeah.
chaotic.
I was in a spot once where I can't say the name obviously in this case, but um, I was there 8 and 9. I mean, basically week 1, I was basically told I needed to evaluate a significant number of people who could but would probably lose their jobs based on my decision, and then basically had to make that decision in the second week. Um, I understood the position that the company was in. I understand that there's probably no one better suited to make that decision. But I still felt it was just horribly unfair to those people. But there was nothing I could do about it. But it's I guess you're just trying to give people a fair shake, and those are the kind of things I always feel that is uncomfortable for leaders. Have you ever had any other situations where as a leader, you've been made to feel kind of uncomfortable by putting a big decision on your shoulders?
One of the ones, and I definitely agree with you, people decisions are always exceedingly difficult, and you're impacting, people in their lives, and those put a lot
Livelihood,
of
kids, families. I mean,
yeah,
it's yeah,
everything, and it
yeah.
sticks with you. And I think you have to have a really solid, principled framework of how you're going to make those decisions and feel good about you did the best you could with the situation you were handed. But the one that I've run into, and I've run into this more than once, so it really sticks out at me is, an executive or a leader will come to you and say, "We think we should completely redesign the website."
Mhm.
And whether you're in B2B marketing or B2C marketing, you're dependent a lot of times on the website for leads, and it's where your customers come potentially.
Mhm.
And it's not a small task, and they always underestimate it. Hey, marketing department, can you redesign the website? Like, that makes me cringe because that it's going to take longer and be a bigger project and be a bigger, longer, more arduous task than what they realize. So the key there is saying, are we going to get, or is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, are we going to get more leads or more customers? And what does that look like if we build, revamp and overhaul the website? But that's a tough one because I'll tell you, Freddie, when the CEO comes and says, "I think you should evaluate whether we should redo the website," they're telling you to redo the website. They're
Yeah,
not
fair enough.
asking you to
Yeah,
evaluate.
that's funny. We just talked about kind of big decisions that people put on your lap, but you arguably made a big personal decision yourself in the last 12 months, and started doing interim CMO work. And obviously it's something we've been working on together. Um, I'd love to get your take on, what it's been like to kind of, let's say, take a less traditional career path through interim leadership roles.
Yeah. Well, the marketplace has changed dramatically over the last year and a half. And so I think it's a great thing to have the ability to go into a company as an interim, CMO or leader of strategy and be able to have an impact. And they love the outside perspective. That's one of the things I love about it, Freddie, is organizations sometimes keep repeating their own thinking and they've all grown up in the business. And when you can come in with an outside perspective, they appreciate that. And the quicker you can learn the business and translate what you know from outside to inside, I think you add a ton of value. So I love the role. I would say, the other thing that you get to do in the interim role is like I said, you're providing perspective and you're able to step back. A lot of CMO roles that I've had, your heads down in the day to day, meeting to meeting. A
Mhm,
lot of jobs I've had, you have 9 or 10 hours of meetings a day, or in today's world, 9 or 10 hours of Zooms a day.
mhm.
You don't even have time to collect your thoughts or be
Yeah.
strategic. And I think it's really great as an interim. You're a little bit of an outsider and an expert coming in to give advice, and providing that outside perspective is key. The other thing that I've learned just in recent times, I'd say, is the best question you can ask is why. A lot of companies do things or have set things up and they haven't asked the question in a long time. And you don't even have to have the answer. You just have to have the best questions. And asking someone, why do we do it that way? Why was this set up this way? Why is this form 32 pages long?
Yeah.
You can
And
get a
it's
lot done
and
by.
and it's like they had, 1,800 other priorities, and just know it if someone just said it's been shuffled under a rug someplace and no one's looked at it for a number of years. And then they forget about it sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun, and you get to provide two big things. You provide perspective, but you also are able to say, we have to focus. Like, we have to have a focus on these few things. And I know when I've been, in certain CMO roles, you're so scattered. You're doing 50 things a day that you don't feel like you can focus. And I think leaders, it's really, really important to say, what are my priorities? And I'm a big believer in writing down priorities and writing down goals and sharing those goals. Now, in some organizations, fast-paced organizations, I've done a lot of work in fintech, and fintech moves fast. I mean, they change their priorities often when they see market opportunity. And so the key there, I think, is when you make a big change in what your priorities are, just make sure you share those with the team, that you're good at communicating those out, because they may still be on the priorities from a month ago.
You talked a lot about some of the advice you're giving to other people. You've also mentioned that you've had some great mentors along the way. I have to ask, is there a kind of either best or most unique bit of advice you've gotten from a boss or a mentor over the years that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I had a boss who, it was coming up on like review time and
Yeah.
bonus time, and so that's always an important time of the year. And hadn't gotten a review from this boss before, so I asked, what's the most important thing that you look for? And he said something to me that I didn't expect, and I've never heard from anybody else. He said, "I will judge you on your next review by the quality of the last person you hired on the team."
Hmm.
And I've never heard that before. It really struck me, Freddie. And from that moment, which goes back a number of years, I put a real high priority on taking the time to make sure you're hiring the right person, both the skill set and the culture fit. And hiring the right people and bringing the right people into an organization has been probably job one for me. And taking care of those people and prioritizing people has been number one since that was the statement. Now, I still kind of wonder if that was really what I was reviewed on, but the advice was, groundbreaking for me.
That's it's interesting. So the focus kind of on people, and it actually tees up. There's a great comment in chat from Masayoshi Sasaki, and he said, I'm quoting here, "I believe that compassion is the most significant leadership quality nowadays. What do you believe the most important leadership value in this momentous era is, Chris?"
Yeah, and I've read a lot recently that compassion is critical, because our personal lives and our work lives are now so intertwined. Everything that's happened over the past year and a half, and I'd say it's compassion, and it's maybe one step further, which is giving people the freedom to talk to you about what's really going on in their world, talking to your leaders and your peers about how they're doing, and having that one-on-one time. It's a little harder by Zoom. So, my old school way of getting to know people and really having a relationship with people was, I said, I never ate lunch alone. I would
Mhm.
always go to lunch with someone in the organization. Maybe it was
Yep.
an equal leader, or maybe it was someone, 3 or 4 steps down, and they always appreciated, grabbing lunch and me getting to know them personally. And that has always been really valuable to me, is getting to know your colleagues personally, and showing that you respect them as individuals, and that you value their opinion. And so I think that is very tied to compassion, because once you get to know someone, you're gonna consider them as an individual, not just someone who you work with.
A great challenge, and there's been a couple of thought leadership pieces that have gone viral recently in the Washington Post. I believe one of them was from the publisher of the Washingtonian, and then there was also some commentary from the CEO of WeWork, kind of talking about the degradation of um, office culture, because they believed people needed to go into an office to for culture to exist, and that the little 2 and 3 minute hallway chats or the lunches and so on was like so important to building relationships. And uh, I would actually say that, and but for the record, I had the exact same approach you did. I never ate lunch alone, and I would meeting with people at all different levels of the company, and that helped me stay informed and engaged, and I think meant something to the team that I was always trying to hear everyone and learn about everyone. But I do think in today's world, where so many of us are going to be remote and continue to be remote, people can still, maybe we're not eating together. You could technically eat together and and have a. I was even thinking you could send someone an Uber Eats lunch and have and treat them to lunch, and you can have a virtual lunch. But just even grabbing a coffee and a donut with someone sometimes, I think, is really huge. And I think people are going to need to learn that those kind of moments that you and I value can be recreated in a kind of potentially remote only environment. And my argument was that it's actually not on the teams to do this or the staff to figure out how to work remotely, but actually the burden is on us as leaders and executives to actually understand how to be great leaders in a digital remote only world. And I think we're going to figure it out because everything is changing. Um, so I got one last bit of advice. Love seeing all the engaged people in chat right now. It seems there's a lot of people who are aspiring leaders or going through different parts of their career based on some of the comments I'm seeing. What bit of advice would you maybe give to someone that was just starting out their marketing career?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time maybe, early in my career doing the wrong thing. I did what the marketing task was and I did what the assignment was and maybe even followed what my job description said. And
What's been
was
doing
really,
again? Let me look that
yeah,
up.
what is a job description? You start out and you're like, okay, this is the task, this is what I'm being asked to do, this is my role, this is my job, and I think it's probably 10 years ago that I had a revelation that your job is to do what your boss's priorities are. And maybe they're not able to always clearly state them. So you've got to make sure, like, are we trying to grow revenue or are we trying to grow margin? Are we trying to grow the value of the enterprise or are we trying to grow, you know,
Great
some
advice.
other metric? Is it what is most important to the organization? And oftentimes you'll make a different decision when you really understand what your leaders are trying to accomplish. And so make sure that you get that time, to talk to the leader about what they're trying to accomplish. I have one other tip here, Freddie, that just occurred to me.
As
Um,
good as the first one, I'll take it.
okay, this is I had somebody ask me this, and I remember I gave them this advice, and it was just great. We all hesitate to ask for a review from our boss until it's the review season. And I one time in the middle, in between reviews, said, I'd like to have a session with you to get some feedback on how I'm doing. And asked for a review totally off season, unrelated to the business and it was a revelation because you have an honest conversation with that person of where they see you're really doing well, where they'd like you to spend more time, where you may not be doing what they want, and you redirect, and it got me redirected. Even though I thought I was perfectly aligned, I realized I needed to go another 20% this direction, and so ask for feedback and a review off season. That would be my advice.
Love this. It's funny if you are a product, they would say that continuous feedback loop is essential to creating an incredible product. And at the end of the day, we are all a product of our own design, trying to succeed in a competitive world. And I think getting that feedback to try and really make sure you perfect your offering is really essential. So. Um, uh, okay, good to know. Um, so, um, so really, that's going to be, I think, a good place for us to start to wrap up for today. I think really great kind of final inspirational advice. So I loved it. That was a great chat. It was everything I was hoping it'd be. I knew you'd have some, great salient stories and advice for any of the people who are listening or watching. I want to thank everyone that's been tuning in, whether you're tuning in on LinkedIn or you're tuning in on YouTube or Facebook. And the best thing you can do to support the show is basically give us a like, share, follow, anything you can do to kind of spread the good word. We would really, really appreciate it. And in a classic oh ship moment, I just received a note on my desk. If it isn't the oh ship show, this is it. This note, which no one can see, it says Robert's internet is down. Robert is the producer who runs the show, which is why we've been looking at Chris this entire time, because no one is here to flip the camera back to me for the final soliloquy. So this is classic O Ship at its finest, and I will have to log back in at some point and probably end the stream. So Chris, you give everyone a nice big wave thank you from me. Perfect. Thank you. And we really appreciate being on the show. So thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. And like us and follow us and look forward to meeting more of you.
Awesome. That way to wrap it up, Chris.
Cheers.
Thanks. No. My wife, who's an astronomer, just came in and said Mercury in retrograde. Okay, now I'm going to log out and log back in.